I'm joined today by Locked On College Football host Spencer McLaughlin as we talk about ASU's move to the Big 12 from a national perspective.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. Stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the show. Today we are joined by a special guest, my good friend, Spencer McLaughlin, the host of Locked On Ducks and Locked On College Football. Call him the expert on just about everything. This episode has been a long time coming, Spencer, and I'm glad that we are finally getting a chance to sit down and talk about ASU's move to the Big 12.
Yeah, I think that they kind of got forced into a corner there. And frankly, they're one of the few teams who I feel is kind of in the same situation in either conference, the Pac-12 or the Big 12, which is if you can figure out the institutional commitment and foundation required and possibility, quite frankly, that has existed at ASU for a long time, you can move into the upper echelon of the conference. It gets a little bit easier in the Big 12. In this season in particular, they are definitely, I'd say, fighting to be a mid-tier team. I think the quarterback league that the Big 12 is makes it really, really tough to just kind of make that jump. Now, that all depends on how ASU feels about Sam Leavitt being their starter. And look, if he beat out Rashado, who I know is a talented guy and may not be the most popular person in the ASU community, but I think that for Arizona State, if they make a bowl game this year, yeah, that's a successful season. But in the long run in the Big 12, I think the expectations are slightly different than what they were in the Pac-12. There is a more viable path because of the league they're going to become a conference contender, to push to be an upper third team year in and year out with Kenny Dillingham at the helm. I think that path was possible, just more difficult in the Pac-12. The underlying issue and the biggest similarity that exists, though, is the big stuff has to be done right. So far it hasn't, but that doesn't mean it can't.
So then you would say this is a better move for the future of the program, it sounds like. Something that could get ASU back on track to being that competitive program that they were a handful of years ago. ASU is more often than not the last 10 to 15 years a program that finds themselves in bowl games every year. They're 6 to 8 win team on just about every season. They're not a title contender, which I've talked about on the show before. That's never been the expectation at Arizona State. Would we love to? Absolutely. Is the potential there? Sure, you're one of the biggest universities and you've got a lot to offer, but there's a lot that needs to happen between now and ever getting to that point. That 2014 season or 2013 season where ASU won 10 games, won the South, and was a game away from a Rose Bowl. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get back to that point. I mean, I don't need to explain that too much for a program that's won 3 games each of the last 2 years, but you would say that this is a move that would get them back in that direction maybe sooner rather than later?
Well, yeah. I think it definitely helps you get to the higher level sooner. I think in the Pac-12, you would have faced the same path of getting back to relevance and being competitive and fighting your way through the bottom, rebuilding the program, establishing an identity, keeping important coaches around, like Brian Ward on the defensive side of the ball, who is someone that I've liked that hire since Kenny Dillingham made it. I said that's a fantastic hire. And by the way, though I think Jake Dickert up at Wazoo is good, I noticed that Wazoo went 5-7 after Brian Ward departed, and they had the same quarterback and some of the same receivers as the year before. So when you leave a situation and it gets a little bit worse, that tends to demonstrate, at least at some level, what your value is. And I think the value of Brian Ward is really high. And look, that's a guy, frankly, that Kenny Dillingham's going to have to work to keep around for the next couple of years, because if you're at a program that has kind of bottomed out the way that Arizona State did with the 3-9 season, or back-to-back 3-9 seasons now, once you start to rebuild, if you make noise in the Big 12, and if the defense continues to be a strength for this Sun Devils program with an offensive head coach, he's going to attract a lot of attention. But that's something that you'd certainly take as an ASU fan, because there is a path to building the Big 12. After this year, the conference is going to be much more gettable. I think fighting to get a bowl game this year is an attainable, reasonable goal for Arizona State. Next year, if that bowl season materializes, you begin to discuss, okay, can there be an 8-9 win season in here? And they push for an appearance in the conference championship game, because after this season, you're going to lose Shedeur Sanders to the NFL from Colorado. I believe Jalen Daniels is going to be done at Kansas. Cam Rising might be back, not a guarantee, but might be back at Utah. Kyle Whittingham, by the way, might not even be back, because they just named their defensive coordinator, their head coach in waiting, which means Whittingham is going to be out within the next couple of years. Arizona is going to lose Noah Fafita. Like, there are just a lot of guys who are really good that make the Big 12 what I think is the best quarterback conference in college football this year, and makes it weaker. It is going to be a step back year from that standpoint. So I think it's more gettable, but you have to have a good, solid foundational season this year to have those sorts of expectations.
And we'll talk about what we want to see as far as expectations goes in a little later in the podcast. Before we get that far, I do have another question for you. It's this weird situation ASU finds themselves in. You're going to enter the year, and rightfully so, in the cellar of the Big 12. But the way that the Big 12 is right now, for me, there's 5 teams at the top in their own little category. Kansas State, Arizona, Utah, Oklahoma State. After that, it feels like there's this weird muddle of these decent teams like UCF, some teams that are on the rebuild like Cincinnati and BYU. Where is it fair to put ASU in the cellar right now? We'll start there.
I don't know about the cellar. I mean, what's the threshold of teams that we're defining as the cellar of the Big 12? Because you've got 16 teams in that league. So I would think you probably say the cellar is the bottom 4. And right. I think ASU is more likely to be in the next 4, right? I think you have your conference contenders, your next tier, fighting for a bowl game, bottom dwellers. I think those are the tiers you can kind of split the conference into. If you want to do 3 tiers like that, that's completely fine. I don't think ASU is completely at the bottom. I'd expect them to be better than a Cincinnati or a rebuilding Houston, or I don't love what BYU is doing at the quarterback position going into 2024. None of those teams inspire a lot of hope for me. I don't look at them and think, oh yeah, they're definitely better than ASU. I think ASU is probably better than those 3. Not sure about UCF, because UCF has got some real talent. They've got an experienced Power 5 starting quarterback in KJ Jefferson, who transferred from Arkansas. They have brought in a top, I think it's 30 transfer portal class. They recruit pretty well. Like, UCF is a team. UCF has the same win total as a team that I shall not mention on this particular show. And I think a not so hot take is UCF finishes with a better record than that team down in Tucson. So if I'm assessing where Arizona State falls, pushing for a bowl game is where they're at. 7-5 is probably like, holy crap, this is the best possible season we could have possibly imagined. But 6-6 is within reach. I don't think 6-6 is within reach for Cincinnati, for Houston, and maybe not for BYU either.
Well, I can tell you right now, that's music to the ears of Sun Devils fans. But let's go ahead and talk about the competitiveness and where we want to see Arizona State in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I got to talk to you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And the eBay Guaranteed Fit means your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Wherever you get those podcasts, like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Spencer McLaughlin on the show from Locked On College Football. Let's go ahead and talk about expectations for Arizona State. I feel like based off of last year, you could have been a 6-win team. You should have beat Washington if you were healthy, should have beat Cal, and you had the potential to beat Oklahoma State. That was a really tight game. Probably should have beat Colorado. So around that 6-win mark, you're saying that you should be able to contend for a bowl game this year. Are you thinking about 6 wins or so?
Yeah, I think 6 wins is a good goal. 7-5 kind of feels like the ceiling, because you are working in a new quarterback, and that they've been hitting the transfer portal, losing guys like Elijah Badger and BJ Green. Those are, I think, pretty substantial departures from a season ago. Now, having Cam Scadaboo back to pair with Sam Levitt in the backfield, I think is a really solid tandem and gives you a certain high floor. The rest of the roster, I don't know. I am curious, because some may know that I'm an Oregon guy. Is Cole Martin going to be a significant player for ASU's defense this year?
Oh, yeah. He's going to slide into that Jordan Clark role as the nickel guy, as someone who will flex towards the line of scrimmage. He is inheriting a big role for sure.
Yeah, so I love that move. I think that is such an under-the-radar move. I was incredibly high on him. My first impression when I saw him at Oregon spring game in 2023 was that is going to be a future all-conference caliber defensive back. That's how I felt. And I still think that he has that sort of talent, blue chip guy, and I think that was a great pickup for Dillingham in the transfer portal on ASU's defense. But elsewhere, you better have a bunch of dudes in the secondary, because if you're going to make a bowl game, you got to be able to play against the quarterbacks on your schedule. You're going to face the likes of Noah Fafita down at Arizona and the rest of the quarterbacks in the Big 12 Conference. I think that is an important element. I expect the offense to be better, since they won't be snapping it to a tight end or a running back all the time, or gosh, I hope not. And I anticipate that just being solid, decent. I think when you have expectations of one guy to start, Jaden Rashada, and then another guy beats him out, that speaks volumes to the guy that won the starting job, because, again, as an Oregon fan, the last time I remember that happening was after the 2011 season. Darren Thomas led Oregon to a Pac-12 championship game. He'd been in the national championship game the year before, and he just won the Rose Bowl, and everything was looking great. And Darren Thomas had another year of eligibility left. And then after spring football, it was announced that Darren Thomas was leaving the program. And I said, huh? Oh, yeah, he's not going to be the starter. What do you mean he's not going to be the starter? They got some redshirt freshman that they think is good. His name's Marcus Mariota. Who? He better be good. If he is better than Darren Thomas. Yeah, so that's that's my early impression of that quarterback situation. Like, think whatever you want of Jaden Rashada. That dude is talented and is capable of being a high-level quarterback. Kirby Smart's not taking him because he's a charity case, okay? He's taking him because he thinks he can develop, high-end starting quarterback. So that tells me Kenny Dillingham sees something, whether it's mentally, physically, leadership, both, all the above, that he brings to the table to jumpstart that offense. So if he can get them going and just be solid, then it'll come down to how you defend the quarterbacks in this league.
And that's a really interesting situation for ASU, is they lost their top 3 corners. You lose Ro Torrance to the NFL. Dee Ford ran out of eligibility. Jordan Clark transfers to Notre Dame. That's a lot. You bring in some guys through the transfer portal. I know LaTerrence LT Welsh from LSU, former highly recruited guy. He looks like your number one corner. You got Javen Robinson from Washington State. Little bit of familiarity with Brian Ward. He was there his freshman year. Maybe he plugs in as your two. Cole Martin really helps. You're very deep at safety. You've got a ton of returners with Xavier Alford back. Shamari Simmons is back. There's a lot of depth. But again, like you said, it's a matter of everything meshing together because you are replacing not just your three starting corners, but one of your starting safeties, Chris Edmonds, is gone. That's a lot to replace. The good news is your front seven has a lot of really talented guys. I know the pass rush is something I'm excited about. Clayton Smith, fun fact, I included him on my preseason Big 12 list because I expect him to absolutely blow up this year. He finished the season strong. Defense, I don't really have any questions about, but I like that you bring up Cameron Scadaboo is back. I had a stat prediction for him on Sunday. If you missed that one, go and check it out. I talked about how there's going to be a lot of onus on him to be able to step up this year. And that's going to affect the competitiveness of this team is the offense may or may not run through him. If he's ready to be a bell cow, that may be the situation that you find yourself in. But I like that you're talking about the ability to compete for a 6-win season. This isn't an easy schedule for Arizona State. Those 5 teams I mentioned in the top part of the conference, you play all five of them. You got to find a way to, if you get one win out of those 5, I would be happy.
Yeah, and the going back to the quarterback element that I listed, just the Big 12 quarterbacks, ignoring the non-conference, which I think is really interesting. We can get into if you'd like. You've got Baron Morton at Texas Tech, blue chip prospect, starting experience from a year ago, big expectations down there. That game's in Lubbock, tough one to win. Then you have Jalen Daniels for Kansas, Cam Rising, Utah. I frankly don't even know Cincinnati's quarterback situation. I just don't expect that much from them. Emory Jones, I think, was there for an hour last season. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Then Oklahoma State, not wild about their quarterback situation, but then UCF, KJ Jefferson, Arkansas transfer. Good experienced football player. Not super accurate, but a playmaker and a good guy to have. Avery Johnson at Kansas State, really talented guy. BYU, don't like their quarterback room. Noah Fafita, Arizona. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks you're going to face this year who I feel like are above average or above average to some degree in college football. So that's going to be, I think, the challenging element to this for Arizona State is how can they match up? How can Sam Leavitt duel against those guys? Because some players, Jalen Daniels, Cam Rising come to mind, are extremely experienced veteran quarterbacks. And I don't know off the top of my head who Mississippi State is going to be starting at quarterback. They're not going to be that good this year. And I think that's I think that's the biggest game on ASU schedule, quite frankly. And as I'm saying it out loud, we might have to record a segment for Locked On College Football this week to talk about that because I think that is a fascinating football game. But it's really hard. It's not impossible. It is really hard to win games if there is a sizable gap in quarterback production. And I think Arizona State fans have learned that over the last couple of years, is you can have a guy that you like Trenton Bourguet, but you can only go so far. You can only do so much, and eventually you hit a ceiling there. So if that element of the team gets figured out, I think Dillingham is good. I think Brian Ward is good, and there are pieces to improve. And frankly, when I look at their schedule, I lean towards the over 4.5 wins on FanDuel.
Let's go ahead and talk about that in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is the authorized marketplace of Major League Baseball and makes getting tickets faster and easier than before. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can get those last-minute tickets and save up to 60% for getting those tickets, and not just sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and anything else. Flash deals, you can save on exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. I like the zone deals. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats. All-in pricing, it's a feature. You're going to toggle it, and you're going to see everything. So there's no surprise fees at checkout. You can even get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. And their lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. One more time, wherever you get your podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On College Football. As we round out this show, we've talked about the wins. You said over on 4.5. Let's start there. Is that an expectation? Is that like a shoot for the moon? Is that just kind of a safe spot, in your opinion?
I think that's a goal that is very attainable. I won't say expectation. If they go 5-7 this year, that doesn't scream massive disappointment. Like Texas Tech, Kansas, Utah, that could very easily be 3 losses in a row. I think just looking at it, probably will be. Oklahoma State is good. I don't know if they're great. That game's on the road, so it's tough. But Cincinnati is not very good. UCF is at home. Anything could happen at home. Kansas State, you're trying to pull an upset. Anything can happen in a rivalry. BYU, I'm also not that impressed with. Where Arizona State can go over 4.5 and get to 5 or 6 wins, I think is in the non-conference. You've got Wyoming and Texas State, so no FCS game, unfortunately, for ASU. Still, a couple of G5 teams that in year 2, you should be able to take care of. I mean, Texas State, not the easiest place to travel to. I don't know what city it is in specifically. I imagine it's more than a 1-hour drive or something, or however far it is to Tucson. But Wyoming, Texas State, on paper, you should win those games. I think that Mississippi State game is really important because Arizona State going into Big 12 play in their first year in the league, playing all sorts of new teams at 3-0, that feels a lot different inside that locker room than 2-1 and not having a win against a Power 4 opponent. Is Mississippi State going to be good this year? Probably not. They got rid of Zach Arnett as their head coach, and they've brought in Jeff Lebby, and I think he has a little bit of a rebuild in Starkville. So they're probably, along with Vanderbilt, a last-place team in the SEC this year. That's a team that normally you'd say, yeah, that's a tough game to win. I don't know if you're going to do that. But right now, second-year head coach, first-year head coach in Tempe. I mean, I don't think ASU winning that game is completely ridiculous at all.
One last question for you before I let you go.
Okay.
Would you say that 4.5 win total from our good friends at FanDuel, if I asked you to say your confidence level, 1 being there's absolutely no way that could happen, to 10 being I'm going to put 3 mortgage payments on it, and 5 being like a middle ground in between. Give me your spot 1 to 10. You can use decimals if you would prefer.
I'll go full Dave Portnoy here. 1 bite. Everybody knows the rules. I'll go with a 6-7.
Yeah.
I think that is a 6-7. I think there's an incredibly solid chance. If you go 3-0 in the non-conference, I'm hard-pressed to see how you're not going over 4.5, because that would mean you win just 1 game the rest of the year, and no way, even with that particular schedule. So I think between BYU, UCF, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, those are the games where you got to win. And quite frankly, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on an Arizona State podcast, I've been well documented in saying this.
Yes, you have.
I do not think Arizona is that good this year. I don't think they're bad, just to be clear. I don't think they're going to bottom out, go 4-8 or something like that. They have lost about, I think, 8 starters from last year's team. I know that they have a good quarterback, a good offensive lineman, and a good receiver. What about the rest of the team? You know, and they have 1 really, really good corner. Like they have an NFL corner, an NFL offensive lineman, NFL receiver, NFL quarterback. But what is there outside of that? That team last year was deep. You had 2 NFL receivers. You had, I think, an NFL caliber tight end in Tanner McLaughlin. You had 2 NFL offensive linemen. You had 2 NFL corners. I don't know. I think Arizona's win total opened 8.5, and I said on Locked On College Football, I'm taking that under all day long. And guess what, Richie? That win total has since been bumped down to 7.5 because I am not the only person that thinks this might not be a Big 12 title contending year. I was actually just with an Arizona fan for a few days, a buddy of mine, please forgive me, and he was saying he was saying the same thing, like, yeah, I don't know if we're going to be that good this year. And I'm like, I don't either. Like, I think Arizona might be closer to a 7-5 team than they are a 9-3 team. I would definitely pick 7-5 before I pick 9-3. I don't think that's the national narrative, but I don't know what Brent Brennan does coaching against Power 4 head coaches all the time. And I don't trust that. I just don't know that they have done enough for me to say, yeah, they've replaced all the guys. Like Bill Norton not there, Tanner McLaughlin, Jacob Cowing, Jonah Coleman, Ephesians Prysock, Jordan Morgan. Like, those are big impact players.
They are.
Those are big impact players. So I don't see them as a Big 12 title contender. And that game being on the road obviously makes it tough to try and win that duel in the desert away from home. But I don't know. If you think an ASU is a 5-ish win team, is it out of the realm of possibility for a 5-win team to beat a 7-win team? Nope, not at all. So I would look at those games. Arizona, BYU, I think at Kansas State is really tough. I think Utah and Kansas are both tough. At Texas Tech is tough. But UCF, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, BYU, Arizona, I think they're winning at least 2 of those games. So if they go unbeaten in the non-conference, which is viable, that's an easy over 4.5 for me.
Perfect. Yes or no? I lied. Last question. No in between. Yes or no? Is ASU taking the cup home?
No, it's in Tucson.
That's okay.
If it were in Tempe, yes.
Okay.
If it were in Tempe, I'd do it. Probably not in Tucson.
Well, I've gone to Tucson twice to see a game. I am 0-2. Hopefully, I can get to 1-2 this year. Spencer, I appreciate you hopping on. I appreciate all of our listeners for making us your first listen of the day. I will see you guys next time. Make sure you check out Locked On College Football as well. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.